When Jedd Fisch took over, he said that there would be an amount of depth and that there would be a talent overall here in the desert that we have not seen before. So far, so good. This man is keeping his promises. Let's talk about it. Let's get started here on Locked On Wildcats.
You are Locked On Wildcats, your daily podcast on the Arizona Wildcats, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Thanks for making Locked On Wildcats your first listen of the day. This show is brought to you by Gametime. You know where to go if you need games, if you need tickets, you name it, they got it at Gametime. Check it out. All right, now we got a lot to get to this show, but as always, thanks for making this your first listen of the day. And Jedd Fisch. We got to go back to the things that Jedd Fisch said when he took over. Again, I know that I sound like a broken record, but again, going to continue to do this. This season, or this past offseason, Jedd Fisch said, we got to get bigger, we got to get more talented along the defensive line. Not saying that we don't already have talented guys, but we got to get bigger and we got to get more depth. And depth that can actually come in and play. And if you watched Arizona at all this season, you know that so far so good on the depth promise right there. As a matter of fact, I think we talked a little bit about it in the other episode, but we are going to continue to talk about it. The depth overhaul has been astounding, and a big part of that depth overhaul has been bringing in the grad transfers. And again, these are guys sometimes that you're not going to find Lawrence Taylors in the you're not going to find Reggie Whites and Lawrence Taylors in the transfer portal or the grad transfer portal, because remember, generally those guys are in the NFL or they are starting wherever they are. But be that as it may, I will say that I think the one thing that Fisch has been able to show so far is that he's a man of his word. And when it comes to the defensive line, he has certainly shown that. Now, we got to talk more about this, though, because I think people need to understand how rare it is to have what Arizona has right now. Right now, Arizona is playing about 8 or 9 guys on the defensive line, sometimes upwards of 10, and rotating them in and out. This is not something we've seen before here. And it's not like this is just dead weight that's being thrown out there. These are guys that can play. And not only are they guys that can play, let's be honest here, they're difference makers, some of these players. So, let's just kind of look at that base formation right there. You got, because of how we got here, I think it's important. You got a base formation right there. You got Isaiah Ward and you got Taylor Upsahw at the 2 end positions. Now, both these dudes came from drastically different backgrounds. Taylor Upsahw obviously was at Michigan for 4 years, went to Colorado, didn't like what he saw right there with Dion, and then he came here to the University of Arizona. And then you got Isaiah Ward, who came straight out of high school here, was kind of your proverbial, maybe a little bit overlooked recruit, but he was still 6'5", 230 pounds, with a plethora of options or offers from different schools across the country. He was someone that maybe a little bit under-recruited, but either way, this was evaluation by the U of A coaching staff and evaluation at its finest right there. I would volunteer. A big part of it then is being able to kind of find guys in the transfer portal, but also continue to improve all these players. Taylor Upshaw is probably going to lead the team in sacks this year. And not only is he probably going to lead the team in sacks, he's probably going to start kind of that formation of, that Jedd Fisch has shown, where he's been able to get some good pass rushers in the transfer portal. Then Isaiah Ward is going to continue to be that guy that the coaching staff develops. After that, behind them, you got Deuce Davis at the other DN spot. Deuce, we have a lot of love for on this show, and he's going to get there. There's no doubt about it. Again, comes from football, comes from a great football family, great family overall. He's just got to continue to bulk up a little bit. And as he continues to bulk up, he's going to be just fine. So he's kind of that swing D end right there, and there's nothing wrong with that. Then you move inside right there, and it's more of the same. You've got you got Tyler Manoa right there. Again, we talked about him yesterday. Transfer out of UCLA, ex-4-star kid. Tia Savea as well. And then, so you got one dude from California, one dude from UCLA. And then next to him, you got your Tai Uiagalelei, who, it's funny, everybody kind of forgets about. And then before long, you remember, you're like, oh gosh, that kid's really, really good. And I forgot that he's even on the team. And then because you notice that he's putting plays out there. He's making movements out there that you generally don't see. Then after that, you've got some other guys. Big Bill Norton, as we've talked about, we're big fans of Big Bill Norton on this show. Big Bill Norton is, just because you don't play at Georgia, ladies and gentlemen, doesn't mean that you can't play at the University of Arizona. Arizona wants to get to that point, but we are not at that point so far, and that's okay. But Big Bill Norton, same guy right there. Got to give him a lot of credit. Got to give him a lot of love for what he's been able to do. But again, you look at Manoa, you look at Tia Savea from UCLA, you look at Big Bill Norton, all transfers. Then you look on the other side, or you look over there. Then Tai Uiagalelei, straight out of high school. Then you got Jacob Kongaika as well. Also, straight out of high school right there. Both dudes that can play, and I'm not breaking any news right there. I'm telling you exactly what your eyeballs are telling you all as well. Then after that, it just kind of shows you the template, though, that the coaching staff's going for. We got to be able to find guys that are a little bit under the radar, but not only get players that are a little bit under the radar, players that we can kind of mold into our image, and it's a little bit of the, out with the old and with the new type spot right there. And so far, so good. The coaching staff, like I said, has done an absolutely amazing job in that regard. Now, the next one that we got to, you got to talk about, though, is we got to talk a little bit more about Taylor Upsahw, because I think there was, at least for me, there was a lot of questions this offseason. Who was going to be that dude that would emerge that could be that player that, again, you're not going to probably find a Scooby Wright out there or somebody like that, but you can find other guys who can get you those 6 or 7 sacks. Upshaw's that guy. Now, Arizona's only going to get him for 1 year. Be nice to be able to get him for another year, but it also shows, too, that this coaching staff knows exactly what they are looking for, because, again, at Michigan, had 4.5 career sacks, went to Colorado, didn't work out great with Dion. But again, Dion's a different dude right there. Dion obviously is doing very well. This was just a little bit of a different situation for him. And so far, so good. But we're going to continue to talk about that, because I think the Upshaw story is very indicative, though, of where this staff is going. But first, FanDuel. All right, FanDuel. Check it out. FanDuel.com/LockedOnCollege. This is the time that you want to hop on to FanDuel. You want to be part of the cool kids. You got the NFL here. You got college football here. And oh, by the way, you got the NBA right around the corner. You got college basketball right around the corner as well. We're almost done with the dog days of baseball. I don't like baseball, but some people do. But either way, the best place to bet on that is on FanDuel, FanDuel.com/LockedOnCollege. And keep in mind, we've been trying to get you all some money out there by telling you to take the over on Arizona football these last 2 years. If you had done it, you would be a little bit richer in the pocketbook. Don't fight the obvious. Continue to do it. Go to FanDuel.com/LockedOnCollege. You'll thank me later. All right. Now, take a quick little break right here. Then we're going to come back and we're going to talk about the Upshaw journey and about what I think this means a little bit for this coaching staff, and what it and just kind of that next level ability that I think that this staff does have. Thanks for keeping it locked on Wildcats and making this your first listen of the day. I am your host, Mike Luke. All right, Taylor Upshaw again. A lot of people didn't know what to expect, but I think now it's fair to say that when it comes to the grad transfers, when it comes to the transfers coming from another school to another, to the U of A, this coaching staff has a pretty darn good track record of it at this point. Now, you look at Upsahw, again, certainly was far from great at Michigan, but was, again, and Michigan's a different animal than Arizona. It's not quite Georgia, but Michigan's obviously very solid. But the coaching staff knew that he could be a contributor here and not just a player that could take up space. But that has kind of been this coaching staff's MO. They've been able to find dudes who haven't necessarily been uber productive at other schools, who have been able to come in here and take a little bit of a role. Look at Daniel Haimuli. Again, Daniel Haimuli, I think it's fair to say, shouldn't be starting. Justin Flowe is better than Daniel Haimuli, but still a player that's going to be a useful reserve. Then we're just talked about it. Justin Flowe, same kind of template right there. Didn't play a ton at Oregon, had a lot of injuries, just never quite lived up to it. Gets to Arizona, and he's done exactly what they've wanted him to do so far. We're going to get to Gunnar Maldonado here in a second. Again, I got to eat a little bit of crow on Gunnar Maldonado from the previous week, but then also on the offensive side of the ball too as well. JDL, obviously, good transfer for the U of A. Jacob Cowing, same thing. Tanner McLaughlin, another good transfer right there by the U of A. Like I said, good dude. This staff though has an ability to be able to find, I think, players a little bit under the radar that I think you got to be happy with and what they've been able to find. And another guy that we got to talk about here is Gunnar Maldonado. Now, again, I'm still not the biggest Gunnar Maldonado fan in the world, but you know what's fair is fair, and Gunnar Maldonado played incredibly well last week. For the longest time, I've never really understood why he plays so much, but again, that's why I'm not a Division I head coach, and that's why I am sitting here watching. But for all of his, for maybe all the criticism and whatnot, Maldonado played incredibly well this past week. Obviously, the forced fumble, the return, and again, maybe that's what Jedd Fisch has seen, because Jedd Fisch has said multiple times that, Gunnar understands football. Gunnar, in the grand scheme of things, is a good football player. He says he communicates well with the other players, and that's something that you can't take lightly. I mean, it might sound a little trite or whatever the case may be, but Maldonado has certainly shown that he has the coaching staff's trust. And if you have the coaching staff's trust, that's going to count for a lot when it comes to football, because again, these dudes, they don't have to put you out there. And Maldonado, for all the shortcomings, was really, really good this past week. Hopefully this can continue. And if this can continue, this would be a very nice little addition right there, because the secondary, again, it's not great, but the secondary has a ton of potential. And Jedd Fisch talked about it today at his presser, that he wanted to have, when you've got these taller corners, it really, really helps, because between, an Ephesians Prysock, between a Chikario Davis, they're able to high point the ball right there. They're able to go up and get the ball in areas where some other smaller guys just aren't able to get it. Again, not really breaking any news right there, just kind of stating facts. But in the secondary, they've talked about how Maldonado is one of the leaders of that secondary, and there's certainly something to be said for that. If you're, we're not at, during the season, we're not at practice like that, so we can't really see, we can be there, but we can't be at practice per se. And a big part of that, though, is the leadership qualities right there, especially when you're dealing with a younger team, especially when you're dealing with players who, are a little, like I said, a little bit younger. You need somebody that you can kind of look up to. And so far, I guess Gunnar has been that guy, because keep in mind, in the safety in the backfield between Isaiah Taylor, Genesis Smith, you're dealing with a lot of youngsters. And if Maldonado, even if he's not the greatest player in the world, can set them up, can get them into the right positions to be able to make plays, that's something that you can't really minimize right there. And I think that's part of the leadership quality. So again, with Gunnar Maldonado, I hope this can continue. Like I said, there's nothing I enjoy more than making fun of myself and telling people that I was wrong. And again, seems like a great kid as well. And the coaching staff certainly likes him. So hopefully that can continue right there. Now, we got to talk about the linebackers as well, because again, this goes right into that depth factor. Jacob Manu, we all know about. Jacob Manu is going to, as long as Jacob Manu is at the U of A, he is going to be one of the leading tacklers on this team at this school. Because he just kind of gets it. Not the biggest guy in the world, but can get after the ball carrier. And not only can he get after the ball carrier, if he can continue to kind of make that play a little bit further up next to the line of scrimmage, you're going to be a little more impressed by him right there. And I think that's, like I said, I'm not really breaking any news right there. But next to him, it's got to be Justin Flowe. We're at the stage right now where, yes, Flowe is far from a perfect player, but you also know that he's got to be out there. And not only does he need to be out there, he needs to be out there as much as possible. I totally get that he's probably a little bit of a liability in pass coverage. I get all that, but he has an impact to him. He has a hit. He has a style that you generally don't see here at the U of A. And not only do you generally not see that at the U of A, it's generally something that is for those other schools out there, those other schools. But you can also see why he was the number one rated defensive player in the entire country coming out of high school. He's just got to, like I said, I think he's one of those players that you pick up one end of the stick, you pick up the other, and you just embrace both of them right there. And honestly, I'm all right with that. Again, it's not ideal. You'd love to have somebody that can do all of that. But if he could do all of that, he wouldn't be in college right now. And he wouldn't be here backing the A. He would be in the NFL. I still believe that he's got there's NFL possibility to him because of just how physically outlandish his capabilities are. But right now, they built depth at that linebacker spot, and those are the two studs right there. It's Jacob Manu and it's Justin Flowe, backed up by Daniel Haimuli. And talking about depth right there, Leviticus Sua, 4-star kid out of Modern Day, probably going to continue to come off the bench, might not even play much this year, if at all, because of these guys in front of him, which goes right to that depth factor that Jedd Fisch talked about. And we're going to talk about the depth factor a little bit on the other side of the ball. But first, game time. All right, everybody out there, game time. Here's the deal. Download the Gametime app today. Use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off. Now, Gametime is not just for sporting events, although it should be your go-to for sporting events. It's also there for you to be able to go watch concerts, get into events last second, without having to pay an outlandish amount of money. That's where Gametime comes in. I've had multiple friends that use Gametime, and all of them say the same thing, that not only did they get a good deal out of it, they also didn't have to spend nearly as much as they thought they were going to have to, and they got in where they needed to get in. And let's be honest, at the end of the day, that's pretty much all that matters right there. Download the Gametime app today. Use code LOCKEDONCollege. Again, for $20 off. Does it get any better than that? It doesn't. It doesn't. So again, check it out, Gametime. You could use it to come to the next Arizona home game against Washington. Happy Tuesday, everyone, and thanks for making Locked On Wildcats your first listen of the day. All right, I am your host, Mike Luke. All right, now, my friends, let's chat a little bit about Arizona going forward here on the offensive side of the ball. Because again, we're talking about depth on this show. Jedd Fisch continuing to fulfill promises. And a big part of that, though, is the depth. Now, you look on the offensive line. We talked about it a little bit yesterday. The starters are obviously really good. Anthony Gimino talked about how the offensive line is a very impressive aspect to this team. But you're also seeing a movement here where I think a lot of these players are going to continue to improve, but you're getting that depth in there. So if somebody does go down, if a Big Jonah has to miss a couple games next year, you're going to feel pretty good that the guy behind him has some NFL potential to him. And again, that just goes to show you too that some of these guys are highly rated, some of them weren't, but they're all big and they're all players that Tyler Owens, T.O., the great T.O., can work into his game plans right there. And again, We're looking at Elijah Payne, 6'7", 325 pounds. Big Rhino Tapatuiai from 6'5", 330 pounds. I can keep going on and on down the list. Grayson Stovall as well. These are big dudes who have a world of potential. They're not just big. And when Jedd Fisch recruited them, he knew that these guys were players that it might take a little bit of time, but by their second or third year in the program, probably looking at some next level players right there. And that's exactly what we've seen so far. Again, the big thing with it, we've seen a lot of coaches here at the U of A that have promised the world and have given us absolutely nothing. Jedd Fisch has proven not to be that guy, and a big part of that is the depth on this team. Now it's going to continue to improve. You know, it's not where it needs to be. Again, not breaking any news, but it's also getting much closer to where it is, to where you can be a top 25 type program and know that this is kind of where it's at. But again, if you're an Arizona fan, you got to be ecstatic with what you've seen right here. Again, it's far from a finished product, but just to see the work, just to continue to see the day in, the day out push that this coaching staff has made has been quite impressive. And we're going to continue to talk about that. Now, tomorrow, we're going to start getting you ready for Stanford. Again, I expect Arizona to beat the snot out of Stanford. Stanford is not good. There was a lot of negligence, I think, in the last couple of years with David Shaw, where he essentially just stopped recruiting. But you know what? That's neither here nor there for Arizona, because guess what? We have dealt with coaches that have essentially said, we don't need to recruit right here. You've seen the consequences. Arizona is now in year 3 of the rebuild, and like I said, I expect Arizona to take care of business in a big way against Stanford right there. So, on that note, as always, thanks for making Locked On Wildcats your first listen of the day. Really appreciate you all. We will be back with you tomorrow. As always, keep it Locked On Wildcats.